So interestingly, I have not read that article. I caught a YouTube video that made reference to a Highlander reboot and new Lord of the Rings movies. And so I did quick Google searches to find a couple of links to drop in to remind myself to go back and research these further. But I did want to bring them in because I have thoughts, even without knowing all the details.
I mean, what do you need to know? I mean, all it says is, new. It's basically Amazon bought MGM. Two people left MGM to take over at Warner Brothers. They're making a new Lord of the Rings movie.
Yeah. I mean, I did catch that there's no official project announced or anything, no filmmakers attached, that kind of stuff. For the Lord of the Rings one, I'm just curious, and this is part of why I put it in. Like, is this an attempt to explore Middle Earth in general, or do they want to pull like stuff from the Silmarillion, or like that's kind of.
They're going to remake Lord of the Rings. What's going to happen?
I mean, probably. I mean, just because that doesn't seem to be anything that Hollywood can do other than remake things lately.
Well, specifically, Warner Brothers is all about remaking things because they're remaking the Harry Potter movies.
I did not hear about that one.
Yeah, like let's explore more of the other characters and other worlds and other events of Harry Potter. No, we are going to remake Harry Potter.
I mean, I get it, but at the same time, why?
I mean,
it's a cash grab. That's all it is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's a pre-existing story. You can sell it as a retelling or change some things to make it interesting for a new generation and generate a whole bunch of cash.
It's going to be a TV show for HBO. 7 seasons for 7 books. So a little more details.
That almost makes more sense. I mean, yes. I'm not saying it definitely makes more sense, but if you really want to do a remake and do the source material any level of justice, you give it more time, right?
That's correct. And the fourth movie that was based on the 4th book was atrocious. But at the same time, there are certain actors that are synonymous with those characters, and that's a bit of an uphill battle.
I mean, I'd certainly get that, but we have seen where different groups have been able to take beloved characters and recast them to continue to explore the stories.
That's true. And I will say, something like this, it's all in the casting. If you don't cast it correctly, it's gonna be. I mean, for new people, it might be just fine, but for it's only been 20 years. The first Harry Potter movie came out in 2001, so it's been a little over 20 years, and that's too soon for most people. It just 50 years, it's okay, maybe you're good to go, but.
So, interestingly enough, this actually leads me into the other point that I linked. I assume you've seen the Highlander films, or at least one of them.
I haven't. I know them, but I haven't seen them.
What about the TV series? Did you at least watch an episode or two?
I know the TV. I've probably seen an episode or two of the TV series, but I couldn't tell you. I mean, I know it has to do with there's a sword.
Yeah. All right. So your homework is to watch at least the first one. The first one and the third one. You can skip the second one.
That's how you are with movies. That's how you are with Jurassic Park movies.
Well, no, see, I acknowledge the second one. It's just, so we're talking about Highlander, for anybody that didn't catch the initial reference earlier. So the first Highlander had a very clear storyline. The second film basically semi-retconned the storyline and made them beings from a different planet. And just kind of, there's some other weird stuff. But if you watch the second one as a standalone film, It's okay. It's not great, but it's enjoyable to watch. And then the third one went back to kind of the storyline of the first one. So that's why I say if you do 1, 3, and 4, you get a cohesive narrative of sorts. The second one just kind of takes it way out in the middle of nowhere, like it's going to drop off a I don't know. I was going to say some inhumane thing and then decided I probably shouldn't because who knows, PETA may have a representative that actually listens to random obscure podcasts and I don't want to listen to it.
Well, I was going to say the weird thing is how I think you can make a pretty sizable list where you have like the first movie is there's a movie and it's good. They make a sequel and it's like WTF, folks. And then if there's a third movie, then it's like it's back on track with like it's derivative, but it's like the right kind of derivative for what we liked from the first movie.
Yeah, I think you could make a long list of
Yeah,
series that fit that.
I was gonna say I think my favorite one I think would be A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. It's just like it's so funny because the if you've got the time, there's like there's like a documentary about the whole franchise, and if you've got the time, go watch it. They talk about how they talk about the second movie. It's excellent. It's such a fun little bit of Hollywood, and it's like I think there was like some amount of anti-gay something or other that was going on during the filming of the movie, and then if you watch the movie, it's like this is super gay. Like this is like there's a scene where he's in the shower and he gets tied down, and it's supposed to be horror, but it was like no, this is like I can't remember what he said, but it was like this is kind of a gay fantasy. I think the actor was like, yeah, this is kind of a gay fantasy of mine. So it does not fit in anywhere.
Is that I series. Think that documentary is included in the box set, isn't it? Or do you know? I'll have to go back.
I don't know. I don't know. I saw the documentary on when it was at one point, at least a decade ago. It was on Netflix.
And I may be thinking of a different one, but I know there was I think 2 or 3 discs with the box set that had just an insane amount of bonus material, and I never have gone through it all.
It's called Never Sleep Again, the Elm Street's Legacy. It came out in 2010. It's really good if you like those movies.
Yeah, I'll at some point I have a bunch of stuff that I need to catch up on, and the list is ever growing. While I'm thinking about it though, back to the Highlander reboot, 2 big things stuck out in my head when I saw it. One, you have the director from the John Wick franchise, which I think is a huge bonus for anything that's an action film. It seems to understand how to craft a narrative around having fun with action. I mean, there's a couple of gags in the last one that I think might have been a little bit long in the tooth, but okay, whatever. So that caught my eye. But then the other thing, Christopher Lambert played Connor McLeod in the original Highlander franchise. And while I wouldn't necessarily say I would pick him as a action hero by any means, he was my kind of first exposure to anyone in a leading role doing a significant amount of sword fighting. So there's a certain amount of nostalgia for him as Connor McLeod. And then I don't remember the guy's name that played Duncan McLeod in the TV show Adrian, I think, or something similar.
I remember the character named Duncan McLeod.
Yeah. And so there's a certain amount of affinity for him as well, even though he doesn't look at all like Connor McLeod. And they did a good job of having them be relatives instead of trying to reboot the character, everything else. I don't know exactly whether they're planning to reboot the character for the Highlander reboot, or if they're planning to make it a different character, has some tie-in. I don't know any details. But Henry Cavill has been tied to the production as the lead role. And I'll be honest, you can give him whatever name you want. I'll watch it, and I will probably see him in the role and say it's a perfect fit. It just...
yeah, I can see that.
He has the ability, to me, to kind of slip into a bunch of different roles that I might have some pretty strong affinity for a character or casting, previously, but I will absolutely acknowledge and agree with him in the role because of what he brings to the role. And I still haven't watched The Witcher, and I need to, because apparently it was really good while he was tied to it.
Okay. I'm not sure that I watched it. Tried to watch it at some point. I don't know the game. I don't know the story. And then I think somebody turned me off because they said they didn't like it. And I just couldn't get into it. And there's other things that I wanted to watch, so I didn't get into The Witcher.
I think that's all I had for those two. They just caught my eye or caught my ear with the video I watched, and then I added a couple of links.
I think that... So this is like maybe kind of like the larger concern is that entertainment's sort of trying to figure out what entertainment's going to be. And I actually am surprised we haven't talked about this yet, but there's like fun... I don't know if it's a fun rumor, but there's... I think there's always been some level of rumor that... about Apple and Disney, but lately I've been hearing more chatter about how Apple could buy Disney. Have you heard any of this?
Not recently, but I am familiar with the... So ever since Jobs purchased Pixar...
They've always had a relationship.
Right. And there have been different points since then where they've talked about Apple's net worth and how they could easily buy Disney and et cetera, et cetera. So prior to the launch of Apple TV Plus, there were some really heavy rumors about whether Apple would decide to purchase Disney for studio production and everything else as well. And then that kind of died down. So if there's something since then that you're referencing where it's kind of picked up, I have not heard that pick up.
Yeah, it's really picked up because of how Bob Iger went back to the company, and he was, he's on the board of directors for Apple. Apple's done, they've done really well with services, and they've done really well with Apple TV. But Apple TV is still kind of it's a boutique streaming service with really good shows. Like there's from what I've seen and what other people have talked about, there's not really any stinkers there. They've made a lot of really good decisions. And I've watched a number of Apple TV shows. They've had some good shows, like Ted Lasso, to name one. But
yeah, they've had quite a few.
Yeah,
and I think I just want to jump in and add one caveat. It seems to be the one platform where the show might be great, but there is content for different people. And so some of the content is not going to be content you're going to enjoy, but it doesn't take away from how great the execution is.
Yes. It's that, and that's what I mean. It's not trying to be everything to everyone. It's just like, hey, everything that they've done, it's like, if you're into this genre or if you're into this story, it's going to be good. So, I haven't seen anything bad on there. They've done really well with their comedy shows. One of my favorite showrunners is, he did Ted Lasso and Shrinking. So anyway, but there's some new talks about Apple purchasing Disney, and it's like, I think the narrative is that there's not a lot of growth available for Disney. all the streaming, there's not enough room for how many streaming services there are right now, and most people think that it's going to be. When I say people, it's what's the not analyst, but maybe it's analyst. Is that what I'm thinking of? Pundits, analyst. They're the people who like make it. Yeah, I get analysts. You've got analysts that are like saying certain things based on certain data. You've got pundits that are like discussing it and with the analyst dissecting what the analysts have written, etc. And so people who know more about this more than I do are talking about this, and it's a renewed sort of thing where it's like there's going to be. You're going to have Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and one other as far as streaming services go. And who the one other is going to be is, unknown yet. So I actually do look forward to that being, a consolidation of streaming services. But yeah, it's there was conjecture that Apple might buy Disney because it's like of like. All the companies that exist, which companies are most like Apple in sort of their pursuit of their craft? And it's kind of Disney and Nintendo. There's not really, they have a similar approach to how they do what they do, and not a lot of other companies are like that. So, I thought it was interesting.
I've always thought it would be an interesting purchase. And I can see the value proposition from both sides for sure. Part of me thinks that Disney has become too big for Apple to want to buy it, though.
You say that, but Disney is not that big compared to Apple. They are not that big.
I don't mean. So I don't mean from the scope of like company size or operating capital or anything else. I mean from the standpoint of how many different things Disney does. And what I mean by that is you've got all of these different cinematic universes, you've got ESPN, you've got just all of these things that they're involved in.
You've got cruises.
And I don't know... I don't know that I see that being something where Apple would want to say, yes, we'll take on all of it, as opposed to let me buy ESPN.
So it's funny. That's exactly what came up on the talk show with John Gruber. I think his guest was Glenn Fleischman on this particular one. But it's like, or it was either Glenn Fleischman or Jason Snell. I can't remember. But it must have been Jason Snell because Fleischman hasn't been on there in a while. But it's basically like kind of all bets are off on what Apple used to do because they're evolving for sure. Like if you think about how much they've talked about the what's the eyeball thing?
The Vision
Goggles. Pro. Vision Pro, thank you. How much they've talked about the Vision Pro is sort of, with the exception of the iPhone, and the only reason they did it with the iPhone is because of the FCA. They wanted to control the release of the announcement because of FCA filings. But otherwise, everything has been relatively secretive, as you would expect from Apple, except for the Vision Pro. And part of it is, I know that it's obvious that they want the buy-in, a certain amount of buy-in and apps available on day one for it. And, you kind of have to talk about it if that's going to be, if you're going to get that. But, I think that was a different move for Apple to announce the Vision Pros, at least 6 months in advance.
They've done similar kind of things in the past, but I'm not to say that it's the same, because I do agree in general.
But I guess on top of this, they're shipping Vision Pros out to people. You have to sign an NDA, and it's like bonkers kind of things that they have on there. So and they have labs where people are coming in and actually using the hardware, which the only thing that they pre-announced so far in advance was the iPhone in I guess in modern times, and I say modern times post the second coming of Steve Jobs, and so it is different.
Yeah, I think though part of what I'm drawing from isn't that the company is different, because it certainly is, but they're still relatively focused on the things that they execute well on, or think they can execute well on, at least. And I just don't see like theme parks and cruise lines being something they would add to that mix.
Well, I don't. I mean, that's the thing. It's like a pack. It's probably a package deal unless they try to spin it off. And you know, it's I definitely get that. It's like that's not the business they're in at all. It is profitable, I'm pretty sure, but it's not the business they're in. It's not the business they want to be in. It doesn't match any of their other businesses. But the others, the movies and that IP and streaming, all of that does match what they are currently doing. So it'd be for that, and then it's like, well, do you just let the let the parks and the cruises just run themselves the way they have been, and let the status quo stay the same? Maybe.
There is an interesting argument to be made here as well, though, just as we've talked about it, that ties into Vision Pro. I mean, if you think about having the ability to do a completely virtual cruise or tour of Disney or enjoy the theme park, I mean, there is a compelling aspect there for paid virtual experiences.
There is, and I think that like what the Imagineers do in Disney in the Disney parks, and what Apple engineers do in Apple Park, it's not that different as far as basic or their craft and what they're trying to accomplish. So I mean, I think the thing that doesn't fit the most is maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like ABC, ESPN doesn't fit the most. This sort of like broadcast TV. But what if what if part of what their plan is like, yeah, we're going to buy it and we're going to change, and we're going to, it's not that they are trying to get into sports. And if they say, hey, you know what, ESPN's no longer going to be a cable channel, it's going to be our, channel. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's where I think ESPN makes a lot of sense, right? If you take the recent MLS deal, then it makes a lot of sense to say, I'm going to consolidate as much as I can across the American sports landscape. And if I can go further, great. But if not, that's a really strong foothold and viewing audience that would be more than happy to pay $5 a month or $10 a month.
Right. And then I think on top of that, it's like Apple is the company that will say, we have this good idea and we're going to change the industry completely. They've tried to, we saw what happened with the music industry, and the television and film Hollywood industry has been incredibly resistant. The cable carriers have been incredibly resistant to tech, and
all of it's got to change soon.
There's only right. I was gonna say there's only so much that they can do. I mean, at some point, your customer base is going to pass away, to the extent that it's no longer profitable, and so it's interesting to see, they may step in and do and do another industry changing deal. They did that with iTunes and the iPod and music. The iTunes store just it turned everything up on its head, and I find it interesting. And it's like, I don't know how, it wouldn't be that long ago that if you said to me, hey, Apple might buy Disney, I'm like, yeah, that's a fun rumor. It's been a fun rumor for a while, but now it's like, it seems, I don't know that it seems likely, but it doesn't seem like it's just a fun rumor. It's like at some point I would say it's changed to a place of they're just biding their time to make a move, whether it's Disney or something else, because like they've grown their streaming service organically the way that it is now, and it's pretty good. It's really good actually. So
There are also two other news stories that probably should be mentioned in conjunction with this that make it more believable. One, there's been a long-standing dispute at this point between Spectrum Charter and Disney, where they can't reach an agreement on contract renewal. And Spectrum has taken the stance that it's actually better for them to just dissolve their cable company, like television business,
yeah,
and focus entirely on their other businesses for internet, phone, etc., than to agree to Disney's stipulations or whatever the holding point is in the negotiations.
whatever their contractual.
So that's one.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. That's one. The other is that we have reached a point where if you chose to subscribe to all of the streaming services, you would be paying more than you pay for every channel via cable.
Yeah, yeah.
And that combination of things creates enough frustration on the point of the end user that it could also be an impetus for a company to come in and shake things up.
Well, I mentioned earlier, Amazon did buy MGM.
Right.
So that move has been made. Like a studio has been bought by a tech company. So, the other tech companies in the streaming market, it's like, okay, well, we're going to have to start buying up IP because we can't let our competition buy up the IP. And Disney comes with a lot. Everything that's ABC, everything that's, ESPN, everything, 20th Century Fox, and Disney.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot there.
It would be, and honestly, and there's a point of pride here, but it would be sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? It would be disappointing if somebody else owned Pixar, Pixar IP.
Yeah, I can see that. I do think that's kind of uniquely a certain subset of individuals' views, though. Being those people who both are Apple enthusiasts and or Steve Jobs enthusiasts and or Disney enthusiasts specifically. Because I do think a lot of people probably could care less. But there are a number of people like us who have an affinity toward one or multiple of those groups that would not want to see stewardship of Pixar go just to some random corporate conglomerate.
Right. And I think even like I would expect within Apple internally, there's some a sense of not I think stewardship was the right word. That right now, Pixar was on its own, and Jobs was heavily involved with getting them started, getting John Lasseter's team, his folks started, and they were given, he helped give them a great start, and then they flourished, and there was Disney was helpful in distributing things for them, and there was a good symbiotic relationship there, and then I don't know, it was in the late 2000s where they split off, like their whatever contractual obligations they had ended, and then they came back and Disney bought Pixar. But in the process of Disney buying Pixar really took over Disney Animation because John Lasseter became like the head of their animation department. So everything. Yeah, go ahead.
Just have you read Creativity Inc. by chance?
I haven't.
Okay. So I have, and I've read a couple of different Steve Jobs
Am I getting this
biographies.
wrong?
No, you're not. But one of the interesting things I wanted to point out is not only was Jobs instrumental in getting Pixar uh, to the point of it being successful, he was instrumental in the negotiations to make sure Pixar remained as the cultural element that took over Disney.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Right.
I knew he put a lot of
very
money
much
into it.
full circle that he wanted to make certain, to the full extent that he could, that Pixar maintained its identity, even if it wasn't necessarily Pixar. Which, granted, it remained Pixar. There is still Pixar Studios. It's just owned and operated by Disney, quote unquote.
At this point, the difference between a Disney movie and a Pixar movie is that Pixar movies aren't musicals. They don't have musical numbers in them. That's about it.
I seem to recall there being a line in the book that talked about the differences, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. But part of it had to do with computer-generated animation versus any level of cell or freehand artistry animation.
Yeah, well, I guess all Pixar has always been computer animation. I don't think I've ever seen anything that wasn't computer animation from Pixar.
Yeah, and Pixar only did CGI in general, or CGA, computer-generated animation.
And I think at this point, most of Disney's is CGA at this.
Yeah, I think so.
Not that there isn't a desire to see a hand-drawn animation. Those definitely have their place and they're fun and I like them. But
there are some other interesting stories that came out of that too. And this part I may be misremembering, but I think Lasseter worked at Disney in the animation studios and aspired to climb the ranks. Ended up not getting whatever it was. A couple of times, ended up leaving for Pixar, and then now runs Disney. There are some stories like that intertwined, and I don't remember for sure if it was Lasseter or if it was somebody else, but somebody in the book was referenced as having that arc, and I'm pretty sure it was Lasseter.
I could see that. That doesn't sound unfamiliar to me, and it's kind of interesting how well that lines up with the comparison with. How Steve Jobs did with his company and so forth. So, being Apple being his company. So, it's an interesting idea, and I look forward for the consolidation of all of these streaming networks. It's like this is the place where I would like. Well, I don't know. Do I want to see? Yeah, I do want to see consolidation here.
I absolutely want to see consolidation.
Well, I was just thinking about how the marketplace over the last 20 years, there's been so much corporate consolidation. And it's I can remember there were certain class of things that in the 90s and early 2000s, it was there were so many choices. And now there's 4 choices. The best example I can think of was equipment for playing soccer. When I was in high school, I used to get catalogs for equipment, and it was just thick catalog worth of stuff. And it's there'd be 4 or 5 pages devoted just to shin guards. And now if you want to go buy a set of shin guards, it's here are the 10 shin guards that are made for the world. It's here are the 10 shin guards. Here are the 20, the 15 variations of those 10 shin guards. That's it. And I don't know if it's part of it is I don't feel like it's a great thing anymore, because it's I feel like there's how much innovation can there be in shin guards? Well, more than there is now. And I'm just using it as an example of this being the case in industry after industry and so forth. So,
yeah, I get the argument for sure, but there's also a certain point where the majority of people's needs are met by these 5-6 variations. Leave it to kind of the niche markets or manufacturers to serve the others is kind of the mindset, maybe.
Well, I think So I think so. Another good example in the camping industry, like the camping equipment industry, that is, I think it's thriving. I think the well, I, so one, it's not that it's not a huge industry, um, and all the players uh, at the top of that industry, like the biggest players in there, they're making great equipment, and then you've got cottage vendors that are making great niche equipment, or at least you can find great niche equipment from the cottage vendors that fill the gaps that the big industry doesn't. There's an even there's an overwhelming amount of equipment that's out there from that's made cheaply, and that may not be a bad thing, because some people want to try to get into this, and maybe it turns out that they don't actually like it or whatever. That's a double-edged sword there, but um I think it does work out in that industry, but I don't see it working. I just remember there was I don't know that it was a gimmick. It just probably wasn't sustainable because there weren't a lot of people buying it. But I remember there being these thermo molding shin guards that you could buy. And they were the most expensive ones that were sold. And you put them in, you bought them, you put them in your oven, and then they got them to a certain temperature. Then you put them on your shin, and you had like custom designed shin guards. So I guess at this point it's like that seemed like a great thing. But it's like, what are the professionals wearing? And it's like, do you have access to what the professionals are wearing, and is the access to that reasonable? And in that case, you might say, yeah, maybe the market did need to be consolidated. So
Yeah, I always find, well,
I guess the concern is that the market it's not the consolidation of the market, but the consolidation represents a lack of potentially this could lead to a lack of innovation, or a not necessarily an inferior product, but a product that isn't as good as it could be, at the detriment of the consumer.
yeah, I mean, I'd say that's a fair argument in general. The thing that I keep coming back to myself is that once you reach a point of market saturation and the product maybe sees minimal iteration, what we don't see is what goes into R&D and other alternatives in general most of the time. So it's tough to get a feel for, is this stifling innovation, or do they keep trying different things and just not coming up with anything better?
Well, I think if you look at the pharmaceutical industry, you might see like the worst version of what's happening maybe all over the marketplaces. And that is, you have certain drugs that are they're no longer manufacturing, so that they can make significant profits on the ones that they do manufacture, because of the way that industry works with generics and so forth. And there's even the extent that I don't remember which pharmaceutical company this was, but they had Katie Porter was grilling their CEO over the increase of a drug for, I think it was for diabetes. Like the increase, like there was an exponential increase in the cost of the drug over the past decade or so, with no additional research and development that went into it, and no additional features or benefits that the drug gave to the consumer. And I think the concern is that is happening in many marketplaces.
I mean, I don't have an argument for it, of course, because it's a legitimate concern. I think, regardless of how many times I try to come up with some alternative view that might say maybe, maybe not. Right? It's anytime you have consolidation, you're going to lose some company trying to make a name for themselves and do something innovative, right? I mean, it's just kind of the law of numbers or averages at that point. I think the counterpoint in general, maybe not counterpoint, counter narrative, is that typically speaking, for any one product, you kind of find um, a point of evolution where it's difficult to improve. Not saying it's impossible, of course, but there's a certain amount of efficiency or effectiveness, however it's measured, depending on the product, that is not easily improved upon, or maybe not capable of being improved upon at this particular moment. Be it we haven't discovered a manufacturing process that makes a difference, or a material that makes a difference, whatever the case may be. And I think the real concern is that you reach a point where you have this efficiency, and then innovation stagnates when you could have this discovery because of the level of consolidation that's reached at this point of efficiency. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like
But I don't think that
to me,
that's
there's.
not what's.
Go ahead.
I don't think that's what's happening though.
I don't either.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is in some places.
And that's the reason it's kind of difficult to describe in a way that I think is quite accurate, because I don't think this is what's happening either. I think it's purely profit driven. I think there's a point where it's more profitable to maintain the status quo and reduce the number of options, but maybe offer like double the number of colorways to make it seem like there are plenty of options, and then call it a day. And I think that's what drives a lot of the decisions. The only reason I'm even trying to provide the counter narrative is that I do think there's a point where products or whatever reaches this kind of level of mass adoption that lends itself to creating that environment. And it's real easy to then focus on, say, profits or cost of materials or whatever one thing that you want to improve, instead of continuing to do the full level of R&D that would lead to innovation. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
like you can fall into that trap, just like you can actually consciously decide to move in that direction.
Well, I'd like to first say that I think we always need a counter argument that makes for a good discussion. whether you agree with it or not, it does make for a good discussion. At least, it's like, I don't agree with this, but we should think about this. But yeah,
I'm doing my best to come up with a counter argument that I can. Go ahead.
I was going to say, there is no. Let's take something as. I don't want to say silly but let's take some, like I like my example of something as inconsequential as the shin guard market. Like I understand it's like, a lot of the companies got out of the game of manufacturing shin guards, but a lot of it had to do with companies being consumed by other, acquisition. It's like, when Nike bought Umbro, did Umbro need to be making shin guards when Nike was also making shin guards? No, we're gonna shut down Umbro's shin guard manufacturing, because like we need Umbro is now going to be a side product of ours, and we want it to do this specific thing for these specific reasons, because Nike's not gonna, we're not gonna put a swoosh on this thing, but we are gonna we're gonna have Umbro do that thing. And so I get that, and it's like, how different were their shin guards one to the other? Maybe not that different, but it's like, this is probably a pretty mature market. It doesn't need a lot of research going into it, but zero research is never good. Can we make, to compare it to the market that I think outdoor gear, camping, hiking, that sort of thing, where they were like, they're testing, they're constantly they have the advantage of the textile and fabrics market continually trying to make a better fabric for whatever reason. There's so many reasons that better fabrics are, fabric innovation is changing at a relatively quick pace. And they happen to benefit from that. They are certainly not driving that market or that innovation, but they are benefiting from it. And that makes their market really lush. And to get some things right, and this is the one that I think is like the worst of the worst. But to get some of the details right, it was Katie Porter was interviewing former Calgene CEO Mark Alice over the drug Revlimid, because it's a cancer drug, and the price hikes correlate incredibly well to his personal bonus over the years that they hiked up the prices. And so that's the concern. It's like, where is this happening? It's probably happening in a lot of places. The worst place it could be happening is in the healthcare industry. And to whip out your term about the healthcare industrial complex, that's a thing that needs to be taken down. And that's where you start. And hopefully it would have some impact on other markets like the shin guard market.
So I intentionally avoided referencing the healthcare stuff because it's just a fucking sham in the first place.
Right.
Like I cannot legitimately create any argument that supports the American healthcare system. I just can't. As much as I enjoy debating or playing devil's advocate on a number of different things, we start talking about the healthcare system, and I'm just going to rail against it for any possible way I can. But all that said, if you take healthcare out of the equation so that I don't have to address it.
Well, it's the easy one to pick on because they're so fucking bad.
Yeah, I know. But if you don't look at that market, if you look at instead the automotive market, for example, we hear about some of the R&D that goes into different products, but we know just because of the nature of the market and the products that they create, there's more R&D than what we hear about. With the healthcare side of things, we assume there's a fairly significant amount of R&D because of the nature of new drugs and vaccines and what little bit we do hear about. And of course, they try to sell you on you're having to pay for the R&D. So we kind of assume there's a significant amount of R&D. Where I was going with that, though, with like the Shin Guard example, that would be an area where we don't necessarily hear about R&D efforts. Right? It's not glamorous. It's not newsworthy. It's not something that's going to spark a massive headline. But I would expect there's still some spending in R&D, even if it's relatively minimal, just because, if nothing else, those companies are looking to make a better profit in equally strong, less costly materials, if they could do it. Maybe that's a bad reason to drive some level of R&D, but I think it's easy to say that there's always at least some basic level of investigation into what else is possible. It's just not at the level that you would expect if there were multiple players in the game driving it forward.
Yeah, no, I think that I think it's great that you say it that way, because it's like just like I said, you could even say there's zero R&D happening for the shin guards. And that's okay, because you don't necessarily need it, because somewhere higher up than that, it's like we are doing research and development into plastics for this, athletic related plastic wearables. And it's like, oh, this R&D that wasn't specific for shin guards, I was like, oh, this is totally applicable to the shin guard. So like, we're going to change we're going to put some R&D time in there based on some other finding. And, maybe you can't make a better shin guard. Maybe there's no, there is a point where you have, what's the term? non-diminishing returns?
Uh, what
It's like, yes, you
there's
could,
a point of diminishing returns.
Sorry, yes, that's what I'm looking. I think that's the phrase I was looking for. It's like, yeah, we could put another $2 million into the research of it, but like we're not going to get anything out of that research, and we're just like, this is as good as it should get. There's not really any better. No, it's only going to be nominally better for no matter how much money we spend until there's a breakthrough. When there's a breakthrough in some other industry, then it's like, oh yeah, we can apply it here. So I do get that.
There's also, just to take the ShinGuard example a step further, there's also a point where what is this product supposed to do, and does it do it well?
Yeah. Well, I think a really good example in a very similar place is like American football pads. Like they've changed significantly over sometime between the 90s and 2007. Like those pads got smaller and lighter. They weren't quite as bulky.
And more protective at the same time.
Yeah. So it's not like there's there's nothing going on here. It's just that looking at the ShinGuard market, it just seems like there used to be a lot more options than there are now, and I liked it when there were more options. But can I buy what are the professionals using? They're using something that they may not necessarily think, oh, I need something better than this.
I will say, based on my general experience with my son playing soccer, the only shin guards that I absolutely despise are the ones that are shin guard and sock integrated products.
Like the ones
don't
with
go that route.
Like there's a sock that has a shin guard in it, or there's a shin guard with a stirrup on it.
There's a sock with a shin guard in it.
Oh, that seems like a terrible thing.
They are the most difficult fucking things to put on.
So here's having played for a long time and paying attention to what the professionals were doing. The last pair of shin guards I bought for myself had a detachable stirrup. So I never use the stirrup because you lose a range of motion and feeling, or touch in your ankle. So I stopped wearing those. Or I got some that I could just slip in behind my sock. And but if you watch professionals, they have really small shin guards. I think they're small enough to like only cover what is required to be covered. And so I found that interesting. Where I remember like early on, I was trying to cover like my whole lower leg.
So the previous seasons, there's been one kid that was on the team that hysterically would just never wear shin guards. Like you would see him if his parents forced it and he went out on the field with shin guards. By the end of the first couple of minutes, they would somehow find their way to the sidelines, and he would not be wearing shin guards for the rest of the match. Like it's just so adamantly against them. And I get it. I really do. Because if you don't find them comfortable, you would rather deal with someone hitting your shin than wearing the shin guard.
Yeah. And I got to say at that age.
Yeah. I mean, at that age, it's less of an issue. Certainly than it would be later on. But I wonder often, because this season will be the first season that he has gone on to play in the competitive league, I wonder how that's going to change his approach to shin guards.
I'm looking. I looked up these sock integrated shin guards. They look awful.
They're horrible. And what's bad is that parents don't really know better at the time, right? Like I never played, so I get the idea of what you need shin guards for. But it's someone was selling me these socks with integrated shin guards, and it's like, here, you only have to buy one thing. You don't have to buy two. All right, let's give it a try. It is the toughest thing to get on a child's foot. If you've ever had to dress a toddler who did not want to be dressed, it's twice as difficult as that.
We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.